Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about the DJI transmission system and the Accsoon Cineview Master 4K and why I'm going to be going from the DJI system, which I previously spoke about, to the Accsoon system. So stick around and join me after the break to find out why. So in my first video that I did about the DJI SDR transmitter, there were a few issues which DJI and other people didn't really talk about, didn't really tell you about. And what I found is that those issues have actually become such big issues that I decided that I no longer am going to use the DJI unit because it interferes too much with my workflow. So let me talk about those specifically. In terms of the system, you can buy them as a pair. So you have the transmitter and the receiver, and you can have multiple receivers, and you can also connect it to multiple iOS devices or Android devices using a relevant app. But what I found was that using the transmission system, when you use it without a receiver and you were using it just with the iOS devices, which is how I was using it, that you have to go through a system that needs to be bypassed manually every time by pressing a button which basically says continue. And unless you do that, it's not going to go through. So like I said in the previous video, if you had to mount it in a certain way, like I did underneath the gimbal, then every time you started it up, you had to basically take it off the gimbal, and then you had to physically press this button for it to then bypass this stop that it had every time. And then once you've done that, then it would eventually then boot to its final state in which it could transmit. Now, this isn't a problem if you did this once per session, but therein lies the problem. So basically, if you're using a standard NPF 550 or F570 battery, which gives you approximately 21.5 watt hours, the battery typically lasts between 30 minutes and 40 minutes. 30 minutes and 40 minutes before the transmitter stops working, you got to stop what you're doing, find a new battery, put the battery in, go through the whole setup process, wait for it to reboot, wait for you to get Wi-Fi on your device, and then start again. So that's every 30 to 40 minutes. You have 4 or 5 minutes of downtime at least when you're doing this. And if you're a one-person operation like I am and I'm shooting stock, I don't have time to stop what I'm doing and deal with these problems every few minutes. The Accsoon, on the other hand, if you use the same exact battery, lasts 3 hours. That's right, 3 hours. So my sessions typically last between 3 hours to 6 hours. If I use the same battery, I can do 1 to 2 complete sessions and only stop once or twice due to the transmitter using the Accsoon. So for that reason alone, and that's the main reason, I decided to move over to the Accsoon Cineview. So like I said, I'm a big DJI fan. I've got lots of their products and I will continue to buy their products. But I do believe that if there's an issue with a piece of gear that affects the way that I operate, then I don't have brand loyalty, as it were. I'm going to use the best tools for the job. And in my case, the Accsoon Cineview is far superior. If you look at the video interfaces on the transmitter, you have HDMI and SDI in on both units, but you have HDMI out on the transmitter for the SDR, the DJI SDR, but on the Accsoon Cineview Master 4K, you have a HDMI loop out, which is very, very handy, specifically for the PYXIS, because you have no direct HDMI out on the PYXIS. Again, if we go back to comparing the specs between the two, the transmission frequency is approximately the same. They both use 2.4 gigahertz and 5 point something gigahertz, except that the DJI transmission uses 5.8 gigahertz. The Cineview uses the 5 gigahertz and has an additional 6 gigahertz frequency band to give you less interference. The SDR has a reported longer range of 3 kilometers as opposed to 2.5 kilometers. But to be honest, in the type of work that I'm doing and the type of work that I think the majority of people will be doing, perhaps maybe not people that are doing FPV, for example, most people are not going to be having their transmitter kilometers away from where they're going to be working. They're going to be working in the same building a few feet away. So this is, pretty much irrelevant to the majority of people, I would imagine. but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So another area where the Cineview wins over the DJI SDR transmitter is in the latency. So if you're looking at a 1080p signal, the latency for the SDR is around 35 milliseconds. If you're looking at the Cineview, the latency for 1080p is less than 25 milliseconds. So even though both latencies are in the millisecond range, the DJI is 35 milliseconds and the Cineview is 25 milliseconds. That represents approximately a 20% less latency with the Cineview 4K running in 1080p mode than the DJI. So that's going to be even better for people who are trying to pull focus. Not that I pull focus and it makes a huge difference, but the next category is the one that really makes a difference to me: power consumption. So the power consumption for the DJI SDR transmitter is 8.2 watts. But if you look at the fine print, it says with Wi-Fi turned off. Now they don't give you the power consumption with Wi-Fi on. And of course, if you're using their OcuSync, then you don't need Wi-Fi, then that's all good. However, I only use the unit when I'm using Wi-Fi. I only use the unit in the Wi-Fi mode because I don't have a receiver. I don't want to get a receiver because I don't need a receiver, number one. And number two, I want to use my iPad, which unless you use something like the Accsoon product, which gives you a direct USB interface, the only way of getting a feed to this is by using Wi-Fi. So I'm forced to use Wi-Fi. So like I said, they haven't specified what the power consumption is with the Wi-Fi, but I'm betting you it's a lot more than the figure that they stated, which is 8.2 watts. But if you look at the power consumption for the Accsoon Cineview Master, that is 6.5 watts average and 5 watts without powering other devices. So the power consumption is significantly less than that of the SDR transmitter when it's not powering other devices. So that discrepancy in power consumption would explain why the Accsoon lasts up to approximately 6 times as long as a DJI SDR transmitter with the same battery. So for me, it's a no-brainer. In terms of ergonomics and mounting, the SDR transmitter is a lot smaller, is a lot lighter, is a lot easier to mount on your gimbal, particularly with the PYXIS. However, I'm developing a solution so that I can mount the Accsoon Cineview on top of the PYXIS, and that solution should hopefully be ready very shortly. And if you're interested in that, leave a comment below and I'm going to reach out and I'll probably do another video when that's ready so people can get that if they want to. So with that solution that I'm going to create, ergonomics is not going to be an issue. So for me, it's very clear. I'm going to be getting rid of my SDR transmitter and staying with the Accsoon Cineview Master 4K, and hopefully I'll be very happy with that. I've been using Accsoon gear for many years in parallel with the DJI transmission systems, and I've been going between the two. And Accsoon have had problems in the past. Now they seem to have overcome a lot of those with this Cineview 4K, and it seems like a really robust and solid product. I'm not being sponsored by them, by the way. I've paid for it with my own money, unfortunately. So thanks very much for listening. And if you found value in this, I would love it if you could like, subscribe, share in your Facebook groups, all that good stuff. Leave your comments below. So I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And until then, stay lucky, stay blessed.